I'll be honest, I didn't plan to stay. When I walked through those glass doors for the first time, I just wanted to see how far they'd fallen without me. How much of what I built was still standing. How much they even remembered. I didn't expect them to humiliate me. They called me the new guy. That's fine. Every office has one. But what hits different is when the new guy is the one who wrote the company's first paycheck, who designed the logo they now wear on their badges, and yet he's the one they send to make coffee because you're closest to the machine. I smiled. I did it. And I said nothing. People love to test quiet men. They mistake patience for weakness. They mistake stillness for ignorance. And that office was a laboratory of that mistake. It started on day one. The HR manager, Melissa, gave me a 10-minute orientation, her eyes barely leaving her phone. "Don't be too ambitious, Ethan," she said. "This place rewards consistency, not creativity." I almost laughed. That was my line, word for word, from an old onboarding document I wrote 4 years ago. By noon, I already knew how this place worked. Sam, the acting director, ran the floor like it was his high school reunion. Loud, confident, shallow. He cracked jokes at interns, flirted with designers, and took credit for every decent idea that crossed his desk. When he shook my hand, he said, "Welcome to the team, man. We run on sarcasm and caffeine here, so better grow a thick skin." I smiled. Got it. What I didn't say was, "You're standing on my floors, Sam." They didn't know my face. That's the part I liked. When I left 3 years ago, I'd been buried under burnout, grief, and legal fights. My co-founder bought me out on paper, or so he thought. We kept the deal quiet while I disappeared, taking my name off everything. New management, new direction, new faces. It worked. I became invisible. Until one morning I woke up and wanted to see what I'd created, what I'd given away. So I walked in through the front door, resume in hand, under a fake last name. I didn't come back as a founder. I came back as an entry-level analyst. And on that first week, I learned something brutal. When you strip a man of his title, people show you who they really are. The jokes started small. "Hey, new guy, copy room's jammed. Ethan, grab us some coffees. You look like the kind of guy who says good morning to HR." Nothing sharp, just dull blades used often enough to sting. By Friday, they'd made it a sport. Sam spilled his drink on a report I spent 2 nights fixing and said, "Clean that up, would you? Rookie tax." The room laughed. I smiled again. Not because it was funny, but because I finally understood how low they'd sunk without me. Every insult was a note in a mental ledger. Every order, every sneer, every buddy or champ they threw at me went into that quiet account I was keeping. And I knew someday soon it would all balance. But at that point, I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about survival and observation. Watching them was like watching strangers live in my old house. They'd rearranged the furniture, painted over the walls, and hung up motivational posters where our first project sketches used to be. Once, late in the evening, Melissa leaned over my desk and said, "You're too serious for this place, Ethan. Just relax. It's not that deep." I wanted to say, "It was deep when I mortgaged my apartment to keep your paychecks from bouncing." But instead, I said, "You're right. It's just work." And she laughed, satisfied as if she'd taught me something. There's something darkly fascinating about watching people treat your legacy like a playground. Every careless email, every bad decision, every lazy shortcut, all of it under the same brand I'd bled for. And maybe that's why I stayed. Not to prove anything. Not yet. Just to witness. Because before you fix a system, you have to see how it breaks. And this one, my own creation, was about to show me just how ugly it could get. But that was just the beginning. The second week, they stopped pretending it was hazing and made a hobby out of it. Sam discovered I was good at cleaning up other people's messes and started timing his spills. He'd set a coffee too close to the edge of a desk during stand-up, glance at me, and nudge it with his knuckles like an inside joke. I'd grab paper towels while he riffed about rookie reflexes. People laughed because laughing was cheaper than being the one who didn't. Melissa pulled me into HR for a quick check-in that lasted 40 minutes and felt like a weather report about my personality. "You're very contained," she said, folding her hands. "We value positive energy. Smile more in meetings. It helps the culture." I asked if there was anything in my output she wanted to address. She skimmed a blank spot on her notepad, then tried a different lane. "Where were you before this?" I gave her the short version, consulting, small ventures. A break. She tilted her head. "So nothing stable." She wrote that down like a diagnosis. When you're new and quiet, people talk around you like you're a chair. I learned more in hallways than in dashboards. I learned that Sam had never finished the product documentation and didn't intend to. That Melissa had promoted her friend to project lead over 2 qualified engineers because she vibes with stakeholders. That our biggest client was getting restless and nobody wanted to walk upstairs with the bad news. My desk sat under the only vent that actually worked. Cold air dropped on my knuckles all day, and the keyboard the IT guy gave me had a stubborn spacebar that made everything I wrote look like a ransom note. I bought my own and didn't file the receipt. They would have rejected it as non-essential. I learned the rejection language fast. Not now, not a priority, not how we do it here. I used to write those emails with softer verbs. Now I got to read the cheap version. Sam loved impromptu meetings because they made him look busy. He'd fill a glass-walled room with people who couldn't say no and run a whiteboard like a late-night monologue. He used phrases like North Star and capture the Delta, and drew arrows between boxes until the board looked like a football play. Then he'd assign the hard part to whoever didn't make eye contact, usually me, and end with, "We move." After one of those sessions, he slapped my back. "You're detail glue, man," I said. "That's not a job title." And he laughed like I was charming. The first real hit landed on a Wednesday. I stayed late to rebuild a client dashboard that kept crashing on refresh. The issue was a silent loop someone introduced months ago when they replaced a function to simplify the code. I fixed it, wrote notes anyone could follow, and sent a clean summary to Sam, copying the shared alias like policy required. In the morning, he presented the fix in the all hands with my notes on his screen, my sentence structure intact, my typos preserved. "We resolved a recursion issue overnight," he said, flicking the slide. "Team effort." He met my eyes for half a second and moved on. The room clapped. Team effort is a nice phrase when you mean mine. I told myself it didn't matter. The dashboard worked. The client stopped threatening to walk. An old reflex rose anyway, the reflex to defend, to put names next to labor. I swallowed it. I used to spend whole months doing nothing but naming things and defending them. I knew where that road ended. By Friday, the jokes went personal. In the lounge, someone asked what I did before I got lucky here. "Ran a small company," I said, pouring stale coffee. A designer snorted. "Where is it now?" I said. "Not here." Sam grinned at the room. "So a startup." He stretched the word until it squeaked. Translation, a group chat with invoices. Laughter. He looked at my shoes. "Good news is we pay on time." He walked out, leaving the door swinging. It creaked like it wanted to talk. People will tell you to confront bullies head on, but offices aren't school hallways. Most bullies are salaried and endorsed. They sit on org charts and calendar invites. They get free pastries. You don't win by shouting louder. You win by knowing what time it is and who owns the clock. That weekend I read through public filings like a civilian. I traced the chain of ownership the way you follow a river back to the cold place it begins. Names had changed. Structures had changed. Some of that was deliberate. Some of it was entropy. My old clauses were still there, though, sleeping under layers of edits, ratchets, triggers, information rights, written in plain English, the way my lawyer begged me not to because plain makes it easy to enforce. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and remembered the night those clauses were born, the pen going heavy in my hand, the room smelling like printer toner and fatigue. I closed the laptop and slept. On Monday, Sam booked me to support a pitch. Support meant sit in the back and email him the answers he should have known. He'd invited 2 angel guys who wore identical watches and identical smiles. I recognized the deck before the first slide finished loading. I knew the version number by the spacing on the title. He was about to sell them a roadmap I drew 3 years ago, bullet for bullet, with new buzzwords draped over old bones. He launched into it, light on specifics, heavy on charm. He talked about modularizing the ingest layer, like he'd coined the phrase. He described a migration plan in future tense I'd already executed in past. I could have recited the next slide from memory. I did, under my breath. After, in the hallway, he spun on me. "You looked bored," he said, smiling a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Everything okay?" I said. "The sequence on slide 6 only works if you fix the version pin on the data adapter." He blinked. "We'll fix it when it breaks." "It's already breaking," I said. "Check the overflow logs." His smile thinned. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You've got a real talent for making things sound urgent when they aren't." I let the silence sit there between us like a box he didn't want to open. He patted my shoulder twice. "Run the numbers I sent. Clean copy by EOD." I ran the numbers he sent. I also ran the ones he didn't. I watched the connectors choke in real time and wrote the fix again, slowly, so I could explain it to someone who would actually listen later. I saved everything to the shared drive with polite file names, and to a place that wasn't shared with names that weren't polite, not dramatic, not secret, adult logistics. That afternoon, Melissa found a new angle. Peer feedback. She printed anonymous comments like fortune cookies. One called me intense. Another said, "I act like I'm above the work." A third suggested I practice humility. I asked if any of those peers had names. She said anonymity protects honesty. I said anonymity also protects cowards. She marked that down as defensive. She reminded me this was for my growth. I thanked her for her investment in my development and walked back to my freezing vent. Small things stacked. Sam started forgetting to add me to meetings where my pieces shipped. He'd ping me after with quick questions that weren't questions so much as requests to ghostwrite leadership. The designer who snorted in the lounge dropped a file on my desk at 5:47 p.m. with a smile. "Need this QA'd before morning. You're fast." I'm not fast. I'm thorough. Those are different virtues. I stayed anyway. The first time I pushed back, I did it quietly. Sam handed me another midnight job with a wink. "You're the only one I trust with this, champ." I looked at the screen, then at the clock, then at him. "No," I said. He waited for the grin that makes no into maybe. I didn't add one. "It's not mine," I said. "Give it to the owner." He laughed like I'd said something cute. "That's you detail glue." "Then it's misassigned," I said, turning the monitor back toward him. Something flickered in his eyes. Not anger. Calculation. He took the laptop and walked away. The room didn't laugh. For the first time, they watched. That night, I stopped writing longer emails than the problems deserved. I answered in exact sentences. I kept meeting notes like a clerk. I said less out loud and more on paper. I slept finally like someone who remembered that anger is a leash and quiet is a key. 2 days later, I passed the glass conference room and heard my roadmap voice without my throat. Sam was inside with a pair of suits I didn't recognize, pitching Phase 3 like a magician about to pull a dove from a napkin. I stood there long enough to catch the part where he renamed something I built and called it an innovation. He ended with a laugh I used to pay for with praise. The suits nodded, pleased by his hands. I didn't interrupt. I walked to my desk, opened a folder I hadn't opened since my hair was longer and my eyes were worse, and sent exactly 3 emails. Each under 50 words, each to someone who still answered email with their own thumbs. Not dramatic, not secret, just using a right I owned and had chosen not to use, until now. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. Yes, it started like any other Monday. Coffee machine broken, Sam late, Melissa rehearsing her Monday pep talk, to a team that already looked exhausted. I sat at my desk, typing an email I'd already written 3 times in my head. Concise, polite, final. Then the notification popped up on everyone's calendar. Executive strategy session, mandatory attendance. Time, 10 a.m. Location, 12th floor, boardroom. Nobody ever got invited to those unless something big was happening. The company had been buzzing about a possible merger, but nobody really knew who the new partners were. Sam was convinced it was his ticket upstairs. Melissa had already scheduled a hair appointment. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, closed my laptop, and went to the meeting. The boardroom was glass and chrome, a museum for self-importance. People filed in with nervous jokes, like kids before an exam. Sam strutted to the head of the table, straightening his tie like a man who believed the world worked on confidence alone. 10 o'clock came, 10:05, 10:10, and then the door opened. The noise died like someone had pulled the plug. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, crossed the carpet. Everyone turned. It was me. Not the new guy, not Ethan the quiet analyst, but Ethan Ward, full name, printed on the legal notice pinned to the inside of the folder I was carrying. I didn't sit where I usually did. I walked to the end of the table, his seat, and set the folder down. The projector was already on. My name glowed on the title slide. Sam's smirk froze halfway. Melissa blinked twice, her mouth half open like she was about to say, "What are you doing?" but couldn't remember how to form the words. I looked around the room, then spoke quietly. "Good morning, everyone. I'll keep this short. As of today, the company has finalized a structural review. There will be some changes, necessary ones." No one moved. "I know most of you don't know me under this name," I said, flipping the first page. That's by design. But 3 years ago, when this company had nothing but debt and 3 employees, this name was on every signature that made sure you got paid. Silence. The kind that means something's gone wrong. I let it breathe. People shifted in their seats. A pen rolled off the table and hit the carpet. During my absence, I continued, I watched from a distance. I wanted to see how the culture evolved, whether the values we built meant anything, whether people here treated others with the same respect they demanded for themselves. My eyes stopped on Sam. They didn't? He opened his mouth. "Ethan, I think there's been—" "Sit down, Sam." He did. Instinct, not respect. I pulled another sheet from the folder. Here's what we found. Inflated expense reports, duplicated invoices, ghost employees, and a handful of projects labeled as original innovations that match documents from 2019. My documents. Melissa went pale. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. Truth doesn't need volume when it walks in wearing your own name. "Effective immediately," I said, "Mr. Reynolds is relieved of his position as acting director. Ms. Keller, your services in HR are terminated pending further review of compliance failures. You'll both receive written notices by the end of the day." Sam tried to laugh, the way insecure people do when the ground tilts under them. "You can't just—" "I can," I said simply, and I just did. He looked at the others for backup. No one met his eyes. The designer who'd once mocked me stared at the table, pretending to take notes. Melissa stood, shaking. "This is harassment." "No," I said. "This is accountability." I slid a stack of signed papers across the table. Corporate minutes, legal approvals, new ownership documents. Everything done clean, quiet, and legal. "I didn't come here for revenge," I said, closing the folder. "Revenge is emotional. I came for balance." Sam tried to speak again, but the words got stuck behind whatever pride was left. I stood. "Security will escort you out once your accounts are suspended. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." No one moved for a long time. Then the glass door opened and the security lead, a man I'd hired years ago, stepped in with the kind of silence that ends careers. Sam looked small, not angry, just hollow. Melissa tried to speak, but stopped when she saw her own name on the email the assistant was already printing. I didn't enjoy it. That's the part no one tells you about justice. It doesn't feel good. It just feels still. I gathered my papers. Everyone else, I said, looking around the table. Your positions remain for now. We'll rebuild this the right way. If you've been part of the problem, I suggest you start being part of the solution. Someone finally whispered, "You're really him." I always was. And that was it. No shouting, no confetti, no victory music. Just the sound of doors opening and closing, the quiet hum of a machine restarting after years of misuse. When I left the boardroom, people watched me like I was walking out of a fire I'd started just to prove it could burn clean. Downstairs, I passed the wall with the old mission statement. My mission statement. Someone had replaced it with a bland corporate slogan, delivering synergy through innovation. I stopped, pulled a marker from my pocket, crossed out every word. Underneath, I wrote, "Respect isn't optional." Then I walked out into the sunlight. They'd learned soon enough that the story didn't end there. They thought the story ended with my revenge. It didn't. After that Monday, the building felt different. Quieter, slower, almost shy. No one made small talk near my desk anymore. The same people who laughed the loudest now typed softly, like guilt had a sound. But I didn't stay long enough to let the silence turn into apology. By Wednesday, I'd already made my decision. I wasn't staying to rule the ruins. I hadn't come back to wear the crown. I'd come back to take it off. I spent that morning walking through the floors, one last time. I passed the glass meeting rooms, the break area with the coffee machine still broken, the corner where I'd once stayed, late fixing someone else's mistake while they drank in the parking lot. Everything looked smaller now, not because it had shrunk, but because I'd finally stopped needing it to be big. People avoided my eyes except one of the interns, the only person who ever said thank you when I helped her with her code. She stood by the elevator, nervously clutching a folder. "Mr. Ward," she said, "is it true that you started all this?" I nodded. She hesitated. "I'm sorry for how they treated you." I smiled. "Don't be. It taught me who they were." She looked down. Are you firing everyone?" "Not everyone," I said. "Just the ones who forgot what work feels like when it matters." The elevator arrived. I stepped in. She waved awkwardly, and I think she understood more in that moment than most of the executives ever would. Upstairs, my partner, the one who'd stayed after I left, was waiting in the boardroom. Same table, new calm. He looked at me the way people do when they realize the ghost stories were true. "You really did it," he said quietly. "I didn't do anything," I replied. "I just turned the lights back on." He laughed once, no joy in it. "You're not staying, are you?" "No." "You could fix it, Ethan. You could make it what it was." I shook my head. "It's not supposed to be what it was. Things die when you keep trying to rewind them." He leaned back, studying me. "So what's next?" "Nothing dramatic. A clean exit. The kind people don't write LinkedIn posts about." I slid a folder across the table. Resignation, ownership transfer, transition notes. Everything tied with a neat bow. No drama, no headlines, just closure. He nodded slowly, then said, "You know, they'll talk about you. Let them. I've spent enough years being the story in other people's mouths." Outside, the city moved the same way it always had. Cars, noise, routine. The air smelled like rain on warm concrete. I walked without checking my phone, without needing to. My lawyer would file the rest. The company would run its own course. At a crosswalk, I caught my reflection in a storefront window. Not the new guy, not the founder, just a man who'd finally stopped auditioning for respect. I bought a coffee from a cart vendor who'd been on that corner since before the company even existed. He didn't recognize me. He asked for my name for the order. "Ethan," I said. "Just Ethan." I sat on a bench across from the building. Through the tinted windows I could see people moving. Meetings starting, calls ringing, life continuing. They were rebuilding already. Good. It wasn't mine anymore. Revenge, I realized, isn't satisfaction. It's just noise finally stopping. Satisfaction is when you don't need the noise at all. I pulled out a small notebook, the one I used when I first built the company. Half blank, pages yellowing at the edges. On the first empty line, I wrote, "Respect isn't optional, but forgiveness, that's earned." Then I closed it, set my coffee cup on the bench beside me, and let the wind flip it open to the first page. The page that once said, Ward Systems, LLC, Vision Statement. The wind caught it, and for a second, it almost looked like the paper wanted to fly. I didn't chase it. Some things you build to last, some things you build to leave behind. And that's how it ends. Not with applause, not with fire, just a man walking away from the company that forgot his name, and finally remembering it himself.